Today I'll be discussing the Mabo case. Case details and overview. The Mabo and Angliss vs Queensland was a legal case made by the High Court on the 3rd of June 1992 regarding the regaining and recognition of rights and ownership of Australian land back to the native Australians. The case was named after Eddie Mabo, who stood up and fought to change the Australian laws and land ownership rights at the time. Who is Eddie Mabo? Eddie Mabo was a part of the Indigenous Australian group of Torres Strait Islanders people called the Miriam people. Eddie believed that the Australian laws on land ownership were wrong and became the head figure to fight against the Australian government for the cause. Eddie Mabo was passionate about the land belonging to the Torres Strait Islander people, and in 1981 he made his first appearance at the James Cook University in Queensland, where he conducted a speech identifying the common beliefs amongst the people of Murray Island about the inheritance and ownership of the land to its rightful owners. After the speech, he was approached by Perth-based solicitor Greg McIntyre, who was willing to take on the case. Terra nullius, nobody's land. Before the British settlers arrived in 1788, it is said that the native Aboriginals have been in Australia for between 50,000 to 120,000 years. The native Australians have a variety of dialects depending on which clan they are from, and maintain their laws and customs regarding the land and people with an embedded connection to country. When the British arrived, they stated that the entire Australian continent was to be terra nullius, meaning land belonging to no one. As a consequence, the native Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people were forgotten about. History of the case. Legal proceedings for the case began on the 20th of May 1982 when Eddie Mabo and a group of 4 other Torres Strait Islander people opened up legal action against the state of Queensland and the Commonwealth of Australia, claiming their rights and interests, or in other words, native title to the Murray Islands. The Mabo case introduced a protest against the 2 pillars of the legal laws system at the time. These were the assumption that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people had no established land ownership prior to the arrival of the British colonisers in 1788, and that sovereignty delivered complete ownership of all land in the new colony to the Crown, overruling any rights that may have pre-existed. On the 27th of February 1986, the Chief Justice Sir Harry Gibbs sent the case to the Supreme Court of Queensland to hear the determined facts of the claim. However, the hearing was adjourned with Eddie Mabo and the people with Eddie Mabo bringing a second case to the High Court challenging the constitutional correctness of the Queensland Coastal Islands Declaratory Act 1985. This act was created by Queensland Parliament in an effort to forecast the Miriam people's retaliation, with the aim to nullify claim rights of the Miriam people to the Murray Islands. And as a result, the High Court then had to consider whether this legislation under the Queensland government was truly valid and effective. The High Court established that this act was not valid because it was a direct conflict to the Racial Discrimination Act. As the court hearings progressed, Justice Moynihan accepted the plaintiff's request that the court should be adjourned and relocated to Murray Island to gain visual evidence of the claimed land and hear from the number of elderly native witnesses. This visit would then prove to be successful, as Justice Moynihan gained a better understanding of the evidence and what the lives of the natives on the Murray Islands were. Decision. On the 3rd of June 1992, 6 of the 7 High Court judges ruled that the lands of Australia were not terra nullius, that is, island belonging to no one. This meant that the Miriam people were granted entitlement to most of the lands of the Murray Islands. The High Court inserted a legal doctrine of native title into the Australian law. where they acknowledged the fact that the Indigenous people had occupied Australia for tens of thousands of years and enjoyed the rights to their land governed by their own laws and traditions. The High Court also recognised that the native Australians had gradually been dispossessed of the land over time as the settler colonies grew to then become the nation of Australia. The new doctrine that was put forward abolished the 17th century old doctrine terra nullius, in which this case the British claimed the possession of Australian land was rationalised on the wrong assumption that the native Australians had no concept of governing, occupation or land rights. This decision would then go on to set the foundation for a new land law in Australia known as the Native Title Act,